Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and I am the host of the Muddy Waters podcast. Thank you for tuning in. As you know, if you tune in often, the Muddy Waters podcast exists. You also know that I struggle to say Muddy Waters for some reason. I want to say Muddy is water. Anyway, the Muddy Waters podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state by interviewing different people from around the state, whether they're legislators or business owners or whatever they may be, different parents or school board members, city council members, to help the people from hearing from the mouth of the people to know better what's going on in our state and where the problems are. What do we need to fix? How do we move our state forward effectively? So that's why we exist. Unfortunately, the mainstream media, whose job it is to inform the people, is failing to inform the people. One of my biggest critiques is that they tend to spend their time focused on pushing you to the national and wanting you to focus on the president, the U.S. Senate, U.S. House. And I think these are important things to pay attention to, but we need a lot more attention here on what's going on the ground here in the state of Maine, and that's why we exist. It's really easy to distract you with the things that you have the least control over rather than in focusing on the things that we have the most control over, which is local politics, state politics, but school board, city council. And that's why we exist. And that's what we're trying to do here. If you want to support the podcast, you can see the top right corner, there is a place where you can see the QR code. You can scan some merch, go to my store, check out some of my cool stuff, like this hat here, Muddy Waters hat, and some other fun items, tons of fun stuff to check out. Support the podcast and help us lose less money, as I'm fond of saying. So, today we have the gift of having with us Guy Lebida. Now, Guy Lebida is the owner of the Maine Anchor, and also was a former House member. Thanks for being with us, Guy.
You're welcome. So I ran for office, never really won, came close 4 times. So,
wow,
I've been campaigning for 4 separate cycles and came close all 4 times. So I'm also the owner of a general contracting business. I've been self-employed here in the state of Maine since 1977. And there's some history before that even. I'm a naturalized citizen. So I grew up in Europe, born in France. Actually, my mom's French and my dad is Polish. And my dad was a second generation. His father moved from Poland back in 1913 to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and then to Dixon, like the adjoining city. My grandfather actually was a coal miner in Dixon City. So he worked like hundreds of feet underground mining anthracite coal. And back in, the 1920s, when he was doing that, it was really tough labor, using donkeys to pull the carts out and everything else. I think people probably remember it was a Nat Cole song, loaded 16 tons of coal, and what do I get? Another day deeper in debt. It's something like that. Anyway,
yeah.
My family's they're workers and always have been. And my dad and my grandfather taught me correct and hardworking work ethic. So I grew up in Europe, primarily a few years in France, like 3-4 years in France, and junior high and high school in Germany. So, I've learned French and German and English. Met my girlfriend in Bitburg, Germany, because my dad was U.S. Air Force, and every 3 or 4 years, they move you around to a different base in a different part of the world. And met my girlfriend, who's now my wife, in high school in Germany. And she's originally from Bar Harbor, Maine. So that's why I'm in Maine. So that's the long and short of it. So
wow. I didn't realize. I've known you for a little while. I didn't realize that you were naturalized citizen and grew up in Europe. So and then wow, nice. I'm you may not know this about me, but you can see over my if I can get, this is my wife here above, right? So she's hopefully at some point going to be in the be a naturalized citizen here in the United States. We're still waiting to get her over here, but I know a little bit. The process is probably a little different from Germany or France than it is from African countries. But and currently things are just a different world, even than normal. But yeah. Anyway,
I came in the legal way. Let's say that. I went through the process.
Yeah,
right?
we're doing that right now. So we're about 20 months in. So like that's how long. That's maybe it's 19 technically, or about to be 20. I applied in September of 2023.
How much do you think it costs to do it the right way?
What?
The natural, and to bring your wife here.
Are you saying the cost? Sometimes that word I meant the cost or the amount of time?
Both.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so like one of the things about bringing her here, the illegal, we can't do it now anyway, but there are frightening elements of doing it the wrong way, which is that like for her, because of the countries that will give a visa to somebody who's from East Africa, she would have to have gone over to like, I don't know, not El Salvador necessarily, but one of the, I think, Ecuador, I think, or something like that, where she could get a visa to, and then make her the treacherous path north, which would be very, very dangerous and scary. But she would be here by now.
I'm not saying it's legal.
No, I'm not saying that you're advising that. What I'm communicating, you asked about the difference. Like she could theoretically, she would be here by now if we tried to go that kind of a route. There's obviously dangers and risks associated with that, but she definitely could have gotten here before now if we had gone that route. But the second thing that I would say is like the cost. Yeah, it's a lot. It's probably overall more expensive because I'm continuing to pay costs of for her over there as well as here. She can't work there. We're just kind of waiting, and I'm I've had to be more flexible with what I can do for work so that I can go visit. I spent 5 months there last year, and so yeah, it's been much more costly to have her to do it to have to wait and go through the normal process. But yeah, it's I'd rather do it the right way than the wrong way, even if it's expedient to do it the wrong way.
So I wear a lot of hats, so
yeah.
Said I'm a general contractor, and the name of my company is, Our Father's Business Inc. So I'm a Christian construction company because I love the Lord and I put Him first in everything I do. And I also am, like you said, I'm the owner and the editor of the Maine Anchor newspaper. And there's reasons I do that is so that I can educate the public and about what's really going on, the real news. The Maine Wire does a really good job, but I think it needs to be in print too. And I send out the Maine Anchor newspaper to wherever I think I can make a difference. And there's a lot of people that write articles for the Maine Anchor, and sometimes I get them from the Fort Fairfield Journal. Dave Deshane. He's given me permission to his articles, along with Steve Robertson from the Maine Wire. We're all trying to do, to get the real news and not the fake news, the general public. And that's how we make a difference in winning future elections, winning the hearts and the minds of the people about what's really going on. And it costs quite a bit of money to, every time I send out a newspaper to like a house district, like 9,000 people, it costs like $4,000 or $5,000 to do that. I've done that 6 times now. So people donate money, but I also spend probably half of that is my money each time. And my son keeps up a website at the Maine Anchor. He keeps new articles on there, probably weekly or maybe even more than that. So I pay him to do that. But I think it's really important. So I think that's how we can win back our state. And that's why I do it.
Yeah, absolutely. As you heard in my introduction, which I basically say something along those lines every single time here. That's why we exist too, and that's what we're trying to do. We're thankful also for the Maine Wire and the work that they're doing. and just trying to do what we can to help win the information war. Like, we are up against it, right? The Democrats control all of the television stations, all of the major newspapers here in the state, largely owned by the newspapers are largely owned by the same conglomerate, which is believed to be, I don't know if we've 100% proven this, but I'm pretty confident that it's true. It's a George Soros funded, one of the globalists, or as a new friend of mine likes to call them, the global parasites. But one of the global parasites who try to control our world. They control the major news outlets, and they just sing to the tune that the Democrats tell them to sing, which are really being guided by the globalists. It's not even the Democrats that are the real enemy; it's actually the globalists. Now, the Democrats are doing their dirty work right now, but it's these guys that are the problem, and they control the news media apparatus, and so we have to find different ways to fight back. So yeah, one of the reasons I want to have you on, obviously, is like, you're a fellow freedom fighter in this way, and trying to find creative ways and doing something that basically nobody else is doing on the conservative side, and sending out actual print newspapers in Maine to different areas to be able to get information out to the people on what's really going on. So appreciate that.
Well, yeah. So sometimes people send back, like, each time I send out, like, say, to a house district, 2 house districts, I might get 2 newspapers sent back to me with all kinds of red marking on it, like, do not send me this trash, or lies. And some people, 1 or 2 people will email that, and I say, well, what's lies? Can we have a conversation? Because that's all I want to do, is have a conversation, and not to belittle people or make fun of them, but let's have a conversation. Which part of the newspaper is a lie? Nobody ever responds, though. They'll just say, well, it's a Republican lie. Well, where? What's a lie? But the newspaper is well received. When I go knocking on doors, if I send it to my house district that I campaigned in, people usually have a lot of good things. They say they love the paper, and please keep sending. So I hope to continue doing that.
And what type of issues do you tend to cover? Is it like, so I think, like, one of the things, obviously, there is some stuff that's being covered by the mainstream news apparatus that is not horrible, I'm sure. I don't know. I don't read their stuff, but, like, let's say there's something that's not, like, biased and one-sided and just political, but is actually reporting some things that are going on. I mean, it seems to me that, like, most of the stuff that we would need to report on is not, hey, this team won first prize at whatever, but more, like, kind of balancing out the news and talking about the things that that the other side is not talking about. But I don't know. That's my thought without digging too deep into it. But, like, what do you guys typically have in the paper?
I would like to have local news in there, and more of that, like the local sports teams, or the obituary, or traffic reports, police report, things like that. But I've been mainly concentrating on why it's so difficult to live in the state of Maine. Like, for instance, the high cost of electricity. Okay, so I've written articles explaining exactly why electric costs are so expensive. And mainly it's the legislature, the Democrats in the legislature, and maybe 1 or 2 Republicans that vote to put in all these solar farms and the wind it's a very costly way to generate electricity. And every time you see another solar farm go in, you can expect your electric rates to go up even higher. So when I explain that in writing, and I'm being brief and to the point, but I'm very detailed in the articles in the paper and explaining it. And nobody's ever asked or said that was wrong. So I'm sitting here in my truck, and there's some people walking by. I'm actually in Topsom, and they're waving to me. So once so I actually going in back of me, there's a crew working sheetrock and everything else. So I might get interrupted too.
Well, understandable. Thanks for taking the time either way. So
it's important, right? This is why I do this. So a lot of people ask me, why do you spend your time and your money out campaigning or printing the newspaper? And it's a really simple answer. And it's probably the same answer that a lot of people have that are in this fight. I have a total of 12 grandchildren. 10 of them live here in the state of Maine. And I got 3 out of my 4 children that live here in the state of Maine. That's why I do this. Okay, it's for them because they're not going to be able to afford to live here. They're not. Yeah. This is a really liberal state, and Governor Mills and the Democrats and the legislature, I'm sorry, they don't have any common sense, and they're just voting in things that their radical left want. And I mean, we can talk about some of those, but it's not for the good of the people of Maine. It really isn't. Like, for instance, the majority of Maine doesn't want taxpayer-funded elective abortions. The majority of Maine doesn't want taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries on minors without parental approval or notification. You know, they're passing things that the majority of Maine does not want, and they can't even afford to pay their taxes now, and they can't afford to pay their electric bills or buy prescription drugs that they need to live or the food to eat. And it's just going to get worse with the Democrats in the majority. They're not listening. The guy I ran against, his name's Kilton Webb, and this is District 98. So that's the towns of all of Durham, all of Pownell, a little part of Lisbon Falls, a little part of Topsom, and probably 1/4 of Bowdoin, which is where I live. Okay, so Kilton Webb, young man, 30 years old, nice guy. He was campaigning, telling people when he went to Republican houses, he was telling everybody he was an independent. No, he's a Democrat. And right on the Right to Life questionnaire and maybe some of the others, there was a question whether or not you were in favor of taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries on minors. And he answered yes. Well, he was truthful. Okay. He answered.
Got to give him credit for being truthful, but at the same time.
He was. And he was truthful. But that poll doesn't go out to everybody. Okay.
Right.
So there's not many people that get the Christian Coalition's poll sent to their houses.
Right.
They need to do that.
Well, it's partly that they don't have enough money, but it's also like strategic, right? Like there are they want to send it to the people who who they understand it's gonna be motivational for, right? Like that's when you're Maine Right to Life or Christian Civic League of Maine, they've got their voter guides and stuff like that, and they're going to send them to people who they think it'll be helpful for. They're not going to send it to people who will take that information and it will motivate them to go and vote against the right candidates, right? Generally speaking.
Well, the last item that I talked about, though, taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries.
Yeah.
Nationwide, 80% don't want that, right?
Yeah.
But it's closer to 70% because we live in a real. But still,
maybe 65, but yeah.
Right. We should even if it's not going to gather votes for a candidate, the public needs to know what candidates stand for and how they're going to vote if they win the election. Yeah. It's a right to know, right? So they should know.
And this is where, again, to go back to like what the mainstream, I wish the mainstream media was doing its job so I wouldn't have to be here. I could be out there, doing banking or investment properties or doing something in business. There's tons of stuff that I could do and I would rather be doing with my time. And I do have a business. We web design, digital marketing, anybody's interested. But like the reality is like, I'd rather spend my time, energy, and effort focused on other things, spending time with my family, doing these other things rather than spending time, doing a podcast or going around and trying to figure out what's going on and educate the people. Right.
Well,
The mainstream media should be doing that, and they should be educating people on where candidates stand on issues. Instead, they pretend to do that, and they focus on just a few issues that Democrats are really motivated on, and they don't ask full questions. They're not open and honest. They're literally just a propaganda arm of the left. Because again, I remember they sent questions to all the candidates, and I didn't respond to them because the questions were like not this bad, but like the type of questions that are like, when did you stop beating your wife, kind of thing. Like, no matter how you respond, you're gonna. It's clear what they're going for is just they're, no matter how you respond to this, they're going to use it against you. Like, you can tell by the way in which it's asked. And so it's not in good faith, and that's the main problem, is that because of that, people don't know where people stand, and people therefore don't know how to vote.
yeah, my local newspaper here, in Saginaw County, the Crier, and he only puts fluff pieces in there for the Democrats. Right. So if you want an article about, say, taxpayer funded transgender surgeries, if you wanted to specify how the representatives and the state senators voted, you'd have to pay for that. Okay. But he gives free articles and time to all the Democrats, but not the Republicans. So, and then he puts in just a bunch of fluff pieces about what's going on in the community, art and bands and, things like that. And just fluff pieces for the Democrats. And he's been doing this for decades.
Aren't they not supposed, like, especially if there's an election, maybe they play games and they do it before the election cycle or something along those lines, but aren't they supposed to, like, if they give, like, that's where I can't remember what it was, but somebody got in trouble because Kamala Harris was on Saturday Night Live, and then because of that, Trump was required to get a certain amount of time on NBC or something. So, like, if a news station gives time to one person, they're supposed to give time to another person, another candidate in that is my understanding. But I don't know how that applies to, maybe that's just, the major media, not local.
I think that's federal. I don't know if that's the state level.
Interesting.
I don't know. So, I told you about my children and my grandchildren, why I spend the time on that. So this last election cycle, I spent 6 months knocking on doors, 6 hours a day. So I really able to do any work in my construction business. So I gave up my income in that. Fortunately, I'm old enough now, established enough passive income from rentals, from working hard for the years, so that I can take time off and give it to my state, try to save my state and make this a better place to live. I did that for the other 3 cycles before that too, but I was even more determined, spent like 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, knocking on doors. So this means a lot to me, and it's just in me not to quit. Because you got to remember why I'm doing this, for my children and my grandchildren. It's not for me. If I could find someone else to run in my district that's going to vote right, I would support them in a heartbeat. So it doesn't have to be me. I haven't been able to find anybody that's willing to put in the time, the money, and the effort to win. But I'm still looking.
Yeah, still looking. Yeah. No, and that's a reminder that at a lot of different levels, one of the challenges that we have on the Republican side, and there's a couple of reasons for this, and I'll just kind of briefly talk about school boards and city councils, but one of the challenges is we don't have a strong bench. And part of the reason we don't have a strong bench, I believe, is that we're not focused enough on the super local, right? We're not focused enough on city council and school board races. We may have lost Guy there for a moment, but hopefully he'll be back. But that's why it's so important to be focused on school board and city council races. This is how we, not only do these positions have really important and powerful impacts on the daily lives of the average citizen. But on top of that, they, the reality is that's how we build our bench for state house and state senate, and this is how we take back our state. This is how we have strong candidates that are well known by the people and can get out there and get people to vote for them if they already know and they've already got a track record of doing stuff. So school boards are actually, when you talk about the crazy stuff that's going on in our schools, if you pay attention to this podcast, you already know this, but if you talk about the crazy stuff that's going on in schools, most of that actually is determined under the leadership, not under the guise, but under the leadership of the school board. So the school board is actually in charge of the curriculum and the superintendent and all these different policies that exist at the school level. And so that's a really important position. Typically, it's the starting position for most people looking to get involved in politics. And so I highly recommend people going to their school board meetings, paying attention to what's going on there if you haven't already. And then, city council as well, very important positions. And one of the reasons we're going to be hoping to get some city council people on here in the near future. Stay tuned, because I think we've got one coming on next week. But yeah, that's why those positions are so important. And we might have lost Guy. I thought I heard him come back, but anyway, we'll get back to that. But this is why we need to be focused on what's going on. Do we have you back, Guy?
Yeah, I do, but it's all garbled, I guess.
Oh, it is garbled.
The conversation got too hot and melted the phone.
Something, yeah. Too real, too serious. I think we got image back anyway.
Yeah. There were too many brains blowing up. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, I was just saying, like, part of how we build our bench so we have more people available to choose from is by school board, city council races. Did I lose you again?
Anything, Chuck? There we go.
I think you're back now. You good? Oh, it's delayed. Not sure what's happening, Guy. We might You there? Can you hear me? All right. Back now? No? Okay. I should keep wanting to wonder if you're here. Anyway, when you're here, when you're ready, please let me know, I guess. But anyway, but yeah, so here in the state of Maine, we've got a lot of crazy things that are going on. I think one of the things, like, instead of the legislature focusing on the things that are important to Mainers, I think Guy was talking earlier about electricity costs and generally speaking, the cost of living and how incredibly difficult it is to be able to afford to live in this state. On top of that, you have the people in Augusta are not focused on real solutions that help Mainers, and I was just seeing they're focused on bills that are,
I don't know why it's not loading.
Focused on bills that are what's the word for it? This bill about 16-year-olds being able to vote, and just making these arguments in these cases for why a 16-year-old should be able to vote, because basically they made the argument that the high schoolers had their mock elections, and they're generally very predictive of what the actual elections are going to be. So why not let them vote? And I don't know what the motives are by people on the left of wanting to get 16-year-olds voting, but except maybe it's this game because they have 16-year-olds able to get transgender treatment, and so if they can give them voting rights, then now we have one less argument against them for why they shouldn't be allowing 16-year-olds without parental consent to be able to get transgender treatment, from hormone blockers to surgery, as a puberty blockers, whatever they are. And so I'm not 100% sure what's going on with that, but it's a huge waste of time when the average Mainer is dealing with real issues. We've got girls who are having to compete against males in their own sport. And just over the last week, we had two more races, one by one male student who defeated girls to win the girls 800 and 1600 meter races. And so we're dealing with that. And not only that, and I always like to highlight that not only are we dealing with girls not being able to having to compete against boys in sports. One second, Guy. I think you're trying to come back in. Can you hear me? Can you?
I was outside. Back. Can hear you though.
I can hear you barely though. I think we're having some technical difficulties here, everyone. As True Slinger says, and he used to be a part of this podcast, you don't come here for the technology and everything working well. You come here for the truth, and that's why we exist. I think we're still having some challenges with Guy getting back on, but ultimately, like, we have real issues that Mainers are facing, and in Augusta, they're wasting our time. They should be getting men out of women's sports. They should be ensuring that men are out of women's spaces, which is even more important than them being out of women's sports. And beyond that, we've got these incredible energy prices. You've got the cost of being able to afford to buy a house. There are so many people in the state of Maine who don't believe that they're ever going to be able to afford to own a home, have a place that they live, which is the American dream, right? I don't know if you necessarily need the white picket fence, but the idea of being able to have a home, raise a family, and there are so many people. I know some people actually that had to, like, they had a family member who was selling a home in New Hampshire, and so they were able to get it severely discounted, and that was the only way that they could imagine being able to afford to buy a home because of how expensive homes are, how high the interest rates are, all these different things. And just for fun, interest rates are not high by historical standards, but they are high, compared, especially when you factor in how expensive homes are. Historically, homes weren't, $600,000 for a starter home. Well, that's probably a little higher than they are, but not much. I mean, I have some friends recently bought their first real home, and it was almost $600,000 right down here in Cumberland County. There are homes that are for sale for less than that. But it's challenging to find a home in Cumberland County for especially like the greater Portland area for less than that. That's in good shape and not a fixer upper. And so, the idea of people getting out of college and having money and being able to afford to do that is really, really challenging. What answers do the Democrats have? They don't. Their answer is affordable housing. Which affordable housing is, you basically have the government funding your housing, and they own you, and they get to decide what you can do, how you can do it, when you can do it for the rest of your lives. That's the Democrat response to people wanting to be able to afford to live in a home is, we'll let you rent from us, or give you a cheaper housing, whatever you want to call it. And that's where, like, Republicans, we're really, I'm shifting here because we're having some struggles with Guy, and we'll probably end a little bit early today. But like, the reality is, like, the Republican Party is the party of empowerment. We want to empower people. We don't want them dependent on the system. We want to free them from the system so that they can be out there living their life and be free, be independent. We want them to start businesses. We want them to be able to own homes. We want them to be able to not have to rely on government assistance for food, for housing, for all these different things. Like, one of the problems that I talk about a lot when I'm having conversations with people is, the Democrats claim to care about the poor. The problem is they create a system. This welfare system has been pushed by the Democrats, right? And they create this system where people, once they get on it, it's almost impossible to get off. Like, one of the things that I think I said on the podcast recently is, like, if you make it $20,000 a year, in order to be able to live at the same level and not be living on government assistance, you need to make $50,000 a year. The problem is there's a chasm in between that you can't survive. Like, unless you just somehow inherit some money where you can live off that for a certain period of time, or you can live off your parents or somebody else while you're working your way up. It takes time to go from making that amount of money to that amount of money. It's not something that happens overnight. And it's difficult. And those might not be the right numbers. Maybe I'm like 5 years behind on 20,000 and 50,000 because of how much inflation has happened in the last couple of years. But the point is still the same. Like, they created a system where people are stuck on the system and can't get off. And we are focused on solutions that actually help people, that give them the opportunity to get the government out of the way so that people can actually have the opportunity to advance in their lives. And one of the problems with the education system, as I was talking to somebody else recently, is that the education system is not focused on preparing kids to be able to handle the difficulties and the challenges of just regular everyday life. They're so focused on making sure kids feel good in the here and now, not focused on ensuring that kids are prepared for life. And so, that's the problem. One of the problems that we have in our society that we need to address. But the Republicans are about freeing people up and helping them to be able to live their life, whereas the Democrats are focused on basically trying to create an environment where again, what their actual motives are is a whole nother story, but ultimately it's focused on more government control and giving you stuff with strings attached where they basically own you and you have to obey their rules in order to be able to live. And you get stuff, but you're less free, so much less free. And some people want that. Some people are okay with that. And so anyway, well, I think we're going to go ahead and end this a little early because we had some challenges with technology, unfortunately. But stay tuned. We're going to have a special episode tomorrow. We're going to have a guest from Ireland, originally from the United States, but a guest from Ireland. And we're going to be bringing back my old co-host, Truth Slinger, and we're going to have an interesting conversation about the global parasites, is what we'll say, and talk about the fact that the stuff that we're dealing with here in the state of Maine, the challenges that we face, especially in the education system, but really when you're dealing with issues like climate change and a lot of these other, DEI, all this stuff, all the same types of issues that are like major issues here in America, that these are issues that are hitting the entire West. And also, the person we're going to be having bring on, J.K. London, is going to talk about, what she is doing in Ireland to kind of push back against this stuff. Primarily, she's fighting in the school systems, but that's what she's focused on is trying to figure out how to fight back and push back against the powers that be. So thanks for tuning in. Sorry things didn't work out as well as expected, but we'll be back here in the future. Who knows? Maybe I'll talk to Guy and we'll hop back on in a little bit as well. But most likely you'll see us here tomorrow at 3:00. Hope all is well. Peace out, everyone.